One evening, he came home on crutches and found a note from his wife on the door. The apartment was empty. The bank account was drained. That was the beginning of the hardest period in the life of a man who ranks second only to Michael Jordan in scoring in Chicago Bulls history. All those years he had kept a secret. He never gave interviews, never went near a microphone. And when his career ended, that secret came out and dragged him to rock bottom. 7 years without work, rejection after rejection, and then a 42-year-old former NBA forward washing dishes for $4 an hour, and former teammates running into him by the dishwashing machine. If, like me, you enjoy looking back at the great NBA legends of past decades, and you're interested in their true stories and little-known facts that are rarely talked about, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps the channel grow and makes it possible to bring you more videos like this. Thank you. Now, let's continue. What follows is a story that has been compared to the Oscar-winning film about a king who overcame his own affliction, and an ending that would come in 2024 at a ceremony in his honor, one of the last public moments of this man's life. Watch through to the end. Every detail matters there. Louisiana, mid-20th century. Rural countryside in the northeast of the state, the last plantation in Louisiana where the old ways still held. It was there, in a cramped 2-room house packed with a huge family, that on December 8, 1942, a boy was born named Robert Earl Love. His mother was just 15 at the time. His father was not around. He had vanished from the family's life before his son was born. Relatives on his grandmother's side took charge of little Robert, and soon a stepfather appeared in the home, a former Marine, a hot-tempered and harsh man who took out his anger on his stepson for no good reason. When Robert turned 8, he could not take it anymore and ran away from home to his grandmother, who took him in without a single question. Family legend has it that when the stepfather came to take the boy back, his grandmother met him on the porch with an axe handle in her hands and told him plainly that this was now her house and her boy. The stepfather never came back. In that house, surrounded by 13 brothers and sisters, by other accounts 14, sources differ on that detail, Robert's childhood passed. And there, next to his grandmother, lived his beloved uncle, the man to whom the boy was drawn with all his heart. The uncle had a stutter, severe, noticeable, but to little Robert that was just part of the man he adored. Children sometimes unconsciously imitate those they love most in the world. That, by Love's own account, was how his stuttering began, first as imitation, then as an indelible part of his own speech that he could never shake throughout his childhood. At school, it became torture. Robert would sit in the last row and pray that the teacher would not call on him to answer. Any attempt to speak aloud turned into a spectacle for classmates who laughed and mocked him. The boy, gentle and kind by nature, was forced to grow a thick skin, just so no one would see how ashamed and hurt he really was. He withdrew, became a man of few words, and the only outlet for him became sports. Sports in a poor family meant improvisation. There was no ball. Instead, the boy stuffed an old sock with grass, paper, and other socks. There was no hoop. Instead, a bent wire hanger was nailed to the wall of his grandmother's house. There, in the yard, for hours on end, little Robert practiced his shot over and over. On that makeshift court, he did not need to say anything. He just needed to hit the target, and he could do that. By high school, the stutter had not gone anywhere, but it did not stop Robert from becoming the starting quarterback of his school's football team. The thing was, he could sing completely freely. The stutter would retreat whenever he started to hum. So in the huddle, before a play, he simply sang the plays to his teammates, instead of saying them in normal speech. His arm was strong, his throws accurate, and between the second and third quarters of his teenage years, he suddenly shot up nearly a foot, from about 5'11" to over 6'6". With that height and that arm, he led Morehouse High School to the Louisiana State Championship in football. Basketball was not something he took seriously at the time. The starting lineup of the school team included a future Olympic champion and future first-round NBA draft pick, so there was no moving him out. But when that player graduated, a spot opened up on the court, and Robert, finally getting playing time, quickly became the team's best player, scoring over 30 points per game. By then, for the first time in the family's history, people with scouting offers began knocking on his door, though not for basketball, but for football. The choice came down to Grambling University and Southern University. The coach from Grambling showed up an hour and a half late for their meeting, and that was enough for Robert to choose Southern. And there, in the summer before his freshman year, his basketball game on a recreational court was accidentally seen by the university's football coach, a man named E.W. Mumford. Mumford saw far more potential in this tall, skinny kid on the hardwood than on the gridiron, and he convinced Robert to switch sports. The decision proved wise. Every year in college, Robert improved: 12.8 points per game as a freshman, 22.6 as a sophomore, 25.6 as a junior, and 30.6 as a senior. By the end of his college career, he had completely rewritten the university's records, becoming a two-time All-American and three-time Player of the Year in his conference. But professional scouts looked at him with suspicion. A small black college, weak competition. That was how many teams reasoned, comparing him to players from UCLA or Indiana. In the end, in 1965, he was selected only in the 4th round of the draft, 33rd overall, by the Cincinnati Royals. But even that did not go smoothly. At the Royals training camp, he faced incredible competition. The roster already included future Hall of Famers. The team refused to sign him, and Robert headed to the small Eastern Professional League, to the Trenton Colonials, where they paid only for games played. To make ends meet, he also took a job as a laborer at a local hospital. But on the court, he was unstoppable. Over 25 points and 16 rebounds per game, earning Rookie of the Year honors in that league. That got him noticed again in Cincinnati, but even there he spent 2 seasons on the bench, barely seeing the floor. Then came a trade to the Milwaukee Bucks in the expansion draft, just 14 games in his new uniform, and another trade, this time to the Chicago Bulls. His 4th team in 4 years. And again the bench. 35 games, 9 minutes per game, 5 points on average, his lowest numbers of his entire career. It seemed this was just another player who would never break through at the highest level. The turning point came in his 5th professional season. Bulls head coach Dick Motta put him in the starting lineup alongside Chet Walker, and Love responded to that trust in full. All 82 games of the season, over 38 minutes on the floor, 21 points and nearly 9 rebounds per game. Then came only growth. The next season, the team jumped from 39 to 51 wins, while Love became the team's leading scorer with over 25 points per game and made his first All-Star appearance. The 1971-72 season was his best statistically, nearly 26 points per game, 6th in the entire league in scoring. The Bulls won 57 games that season, but in the playoffs, they ran into the star-studded Los Angeles Lakers with Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor, and Chicago was swept without a single win in the series. The following season, Love suffered a partial retinal detachment. Doctors used a relatively new technique at the time, laser surgery, and restored his vision. He did not just return to the court, he returned in form, back-to-back 49-point games. By the end of the season, he earned his 3rd straight All-Star selection. For 3 more seasons, he maintained true star level, nearly 22 points per game one year, exactly 22 the next, just over 19 in the 3rd. From 1969 through 1976, He played 543 of a possible 574 games, averaging over 21 points per contest. Over those years, the team won 323 games against 251 losses. He was nicknamed Butterbean for his childhood love of beans, and that nickname was known throughout basketball Chicago. 3 times he wore the All-Star uniform. 7 straight seasons, he was the team's leading scorer. For a long time, he remained the Bulls' all-time leading scorer, until that record was rewritten by 2 players who need no introduction, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Then came the back injury, 1976. Having played just 14 games in the new season, the club to which he had given 8 years of his life traded him to the New York Nets for a second-round draft pick. Less than 2 months later, the Nets waived him. A week later, he was picked up by the Seattle Supersonics, where he finished out the season, playing through the back pain that would eventually end his career. In that final professional campaign, he appeared in 59 games across 3 different teams, averaging just over 7 points per game, a shadow of the forward who, not long before, had been competing for one of the league's top scoring honors. The era in which Love played did not yet know multi-million-dollar contracts, and his inability to speak clearly in front of cameras cost him virtually all endorsement deals, which usually allowed stars of his caliber to build a financial cushion for the future. By the time his career ended, he had no savings. The back pain became so unbearable that surgery was required, after which doctors warned him directly. There was a risk he might never walk normally again. He came home on crutches after that, and then, returning one evening, he found a note on the front door from his wife. She wrote that she was not ready to stay married to a stammering cripple. Inside the apartment, there was no furniture, no belongings. His wife had taken everything. The next day, he learned that their joint bank account was empty as well. Then came years that former fans never even suspected. For 7 years, Love scraped by on odd jobs, sometimes in catering, sometimes in park maintenance. None of these jobs lasted long or provided any stability. The reason was always the same. Whenever he needed to speak clearly to an employer or a customer, his stutter turned every conversation into an ordeal that almost no one was willing to endure. On Christmas Eve, 1984, Love set aside the cane he had been using after back surgery and went to the Nordstrom department store chain, based in Seattle and operating 150 restaurants across the country. He had a degree in food service from Southern University, and that played a role. He was hired, a 42-year-old former NBA forward, as a restaurant assistant. He cleared tables and washed dishes for $4.45 an hour. One of the chain's executives, John Nordstrom, over time came to know his new employee better and increasingly respected him for his exceptional discipline. He never missed a shift and never left a single spot of ketchup on a plate without noticing it. After a year, Nordstrom called Love in and told him he was ready to promote him to manager, but on one condition: he had to learn to speak clearly. If he found a speech therapist, the company would cover the sessions. On the bus ride home that same day, Love noticed a sign for a speech therapy office in a storefront, got off at the next stop, and walked in. That was how he met therapist Susan Hamilton. She later recalled that a tall man walked into her office who avoided eye contact and immediately admitted that he had tried speech therapy before, but the methods of previous therapists had humiliated him. For example, they made him go out on the street and talk to strangers. But, she said, at that moment he had made up his mind. No matter what happened, this time he would see it through. For a full year, Love worked with Hamilton for 2 hours, 3 times a week. Over that time, his speech improved so much that Nordstrom kept his promise. Love became a sanitation and hygiene manager. 2 years later came another promotion. He became the company's official representative, the face of the chain before the press and partners. In 1989, Love received the Oscar Robertson Award, a league honor for leadership and humanitarian qualities, named after his old friend and roommate from his first professional season in Cincinnati. He walked up to the podium before a packed hall and delivered a thank you speech entirely without a single stammer. The audience responded with a standing ovation that, for a man who had spent his whole life silent out of shame for his own voice, meant more than any trophy. Word of the second life of the former Bulls star reached Chicago. At the turn of the 1990s, Bulls chairman Jerry Reinsdorf called Love personally, said he remembered him as a player, had read about him in newspapers and magazines, and asked whether he would like to return to his hometown and work for the team. Love replied that he had always dreamed of returning to sports and could not let such a chance slip by. And so, in 1992, the former dishwasher once again crossed the threshold of the franchise, not as a player, but as Director of Public Relations and Goodwill Ambassador. From that point on, his life became an almost non-stop tour of schools, hospitals, and charity events. Over 200, by some accounts even 300, appearances a year, speaking to hundreds of thousands of teenagers and their parents about the importance of staying in school, getting an education, and never giving up in the face of hardship. On January 14, 1994, the Bulls raised his jersey number, 10, to the rafters, making Love only the second player in franchise history to receive that honor after Jerry Sloan. In 2000, Love even tried his hand at politics, running for alderman in Chicago, though that chapter of his biography remained far less known than his sports and human story. And in 2007, director Jim White, who had met Love at one of his events, made an hour-long documentary called Find Your Dream: The Bob Love Story. The film featured interviews with League Commissioner David Stern, Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf, Michael Jordan, and other basketball legends, Oscar Robertson, Shaquille O'Neal, Bill Russell. The documentary won an Emmy and several festival awards. Later, White wrote a screenplay for a full-length feature film under the working title Butterbean, which the press compared to the Oscar-winning film about King George VI overcoming his own stutter. In January 2024, Love made his last public appearance at the United Center, at the franchise's first-ever Ring of Honor ceremony, honoring 13 legends from different eras of the team, including the entire roster of the 1995-96 championship squad. On November 18th of that same year, the club announced that Bob Love had passed away. He was 81 years old, having long battled cancer. In its official statement, the club called him a source of inspiration and a true Bulls ambassador to the community, who devoted himself to charity and inspired countless people through his speeches. The story of Robert Earl Love is the story of a man whom silence nearly broke twice. The first time, in childhood, at school, where classmates laughed at him. The second time, in adult life, when his very inability to speak clearly cost a former league star 7 years of decent existence and brought him to a dishwashing station for pennies an hour. But each time, when everything seemed lost, a way to reclaim his voice emerged. First, a wire hanger instead of a basketball hoop in his grandmother's backyard. Then, the stubborn faith of a man named John Nordstrom, who decided not to walk past his employee. And finally, Love's own decision one day to finally see it through to the end. Now look at the screen. Links to other videos on this channel have already appeared. Stories of players whose fates will amaze you just as much are waiting for you there.